And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Now there's the old adage, don't judge a book by its cover. We've used that for games a lot of times, don't judge a game by its cover. But can you judge a game by its board? Because the board and the box in Kings of Mithril didn't look very interesting. Now that doesn't dissuade me from it. The concept of Kings of Mithril, where you're building tunnels through the mountains and there's cards that give you points, that sounded interesting, but the game just didn't look very good. But hey, can we look past that? Let's see how the game plays. Here's the board of the game. This is the mountain that you're going to be digging in. Each player starts with a little mining camp, which they're going to place in a forest that goes into the mining area. Each player is also going to start with each of the three main resources. There is grain, there is mithril, and there is gold. And you have some dice. You're going to put a pile of time tokens here next to the board. That's going to determine how long the game is. This guy's going to be moving around. Every time he passes here, you take off one of those tokens. When the last token is gone, the game is over. The way that you're going to win this game is by these cards here. There are many different types of cards, and building different things will let you draw a card, and on the back of that card will show you how many points it's worth. You can see the cards in this pile are 2 to 4 points. Whoever has the most of each pile at the end of the game can take one of the cards and turn it over and make it worth 5 points. And that's pretty much it for all the different cards. There's many different decks. Like, for example, anytime you build in the woods, you'll get this deck here. The only deck that's a little bit different is the castle deck, which allows you, some of the cards in here let you turn over tower cards. So you'll turn a tower card from 2 points to 3 points. Now, what a player does on their turn is they will place out any tiles that they might have. You can buy more tiles if you want to, and each of the resources will let you buy a tile. The gold lets you buy any tile, and you can buy with the food, you can buy one of these tiles, and you can buy one of these tiles here with the mithril, and when you can pick any tile you want and buy them if you so desire, or you can use a random tile that you'll have from the turn before. When you build tiles on the board, you have to connect to your paths already. So maybe this one here I would build, and you can see that goes here. It also lets me later on build into the mountains. Mountain tiles have to go into the mountain area. Some tiles, when you build them, will stop. So for example, this foundry here will stop things. There's some out here that will stop things too. So maybe, for example, I build this curved tile like this, and then I do put this here. Now, when you put out the different tiles on the board, putting out towers will let you draw tower cards. Putting out these farms and putting out these foundries will let you claim spots in that section. Each section has a matching spot here, and you'll put tokens of your color next to each spot that you've controlled based on the buildings that you build. At the end of your turn, you're going to roll the 2 4-sided dice. So I rolled a 5, and this gentleman here is going to move 5 spaces. If he ever lands on a spot where you have built a building of that type, you'll get a resource of that type. If you have multiple tokens there, you'll get multiple of those resources. Also, when you roll that number, that was a 5, you'll look at the guide, which I was showing you earlier, and that's the tile that you'll place next turn. So even if you don't want to spend any resources, and you will quickly run out of them, whatever number you roll from 2 to 8 is the tile that you're going to be placing next turn of the game. So players are going to place these tiles and possibly get cards. The tiles usually come from building one of the buildings, gives you tiles. Building in a new section in the middle board, you'll see these lines here. Touching the boundary here. Building towers gives you cards. And you have to remember what each deck, there's different decks, and they'll give you different cards depending on what you're building that round. And then you roll and move this guy. If he lands, you get resources. Otherwise, he gives you a tile to use next turn. If for some reason you don't wish to put a tile out, you can simply discard it at the end of your turn. If you, for some reason, shut your whole network down and close off all the exits, then you're finished till the end of the game. At the end of the game, you will score all the points. Whoever has the most points is the winner. Kings of Mithril is an interesting game because as I was playing it, everyone around me was like, oh, this game's awful. And it was, and it is. And yet, I just was amused by it, just how bad it was. Very often, that doesn't happen. Very often, games are bad and they just enrage me. This game didn't really enrage me, but at the same time, it was comedic almost just how bad it was. It was one of those games I'm thinking, who likes this? So I went online and looked, and apparently a lot of people enjoy this game. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because I don't know if I'm an outlier, but wow, was this game just awful for us. Several reasons. Roll and move, come on. We're rolling dice to move the guy. You can have a whole bunch of things on the board, and he can just jump right over them. I mean, he can move up to 8 spaces, and so he can just jump right over your stuff. And it's hard to get any of those tokens on the board. Why is it hard? Because you're going to get maybe 3 tokens on the board with your initial resources. You learn really quickly to only spend those resources on the very valuable tiles, because you don't get many of those resources. In fact, you won't get any of them until you build those things that generate resources, so you better use those. But he can come around and he can miss them, and he could literally miss them every time the entire game. And rolling, so that's random. Rolling the dice as to which tile you get next, also super random. While we're on the random subject, how about those cards you get? Random. You're drawing cards. I don't even know what the points are on the other side of the card. Some are 2, some are 4, some are 3s. It was just all over the place. Not to mention, it's graphically a mess. Just a huge mess. You look at the board, it's hard to figure out who. You're not allowed to build tunnels that touch other players, so technically you could block each other off, but what's the point? This is so much of a non-interactive game. The only thing that's interactive is when you roll the dice and move the guy, he might land on my spot. And I'm like, woohoo, and you're like, well, I wish he landed on my spot. And I sympathize with you, because I wish he landed in your spot too, because the game might be more interesting. So random card draws, which, by the way, I can't remember which cards are drawn for when. The rulebook says, when you do this, draw this card. When you do this, draw this card. And it just says that. There's no chart on the side of the board. It's like, okay, wait, how do I get that card again? You have to build in the forest. All right, forest. Okay, that one's easy to remember. How do I get this card again? A player aid would have been so helpful there. So it's just randomness on top of randomness on top of randomness, mixed in a box that just looks awful, with a board that looks awful, and tiles that it's kind of neat to see your tunnels spreading, but it could have looked so much better. Honestly, I don't know who I could recommend this to. You are simply building random tunnels that don't mean anything unless you put something at the end of them, right? The tunnel itself means nothing. Okay, maybe if you cross a border, but really, other than that, the tunnels themselves mean nothing. It's the stuff you put at the end. So you're just trying to build your network out. And you have a decision of where to build it, which is usually like 1 out of 2 places. If to build it at all, which is either duh, yes, or duh, no. And then rolling dice to see where a guy lands. Come on now. This is not a game. This is an exercise in futility. And so I laugh because it's that bad. Dice Tower Judgment, there's really nothing good here.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!